Okay, so welcome back. I believe this is part 4 of our colonial artists that we're looking at, our colonial, some were enslaved, some were free artists, okay? And Patrick Reason, as far as I know, was a free man. Now, Patrick Reason is part of um, he was one of the first recorded. Now, I believe that there were more than likely other African American or African descent artists who also had the same skill sets, which was the skill set to be able to do graphic arts. Now, graphic arts, people are sometimes confused about what that is. Graphic arts is usually some art form that is meant to be mass produced. So let me see, I'm going to try to find an example of graphic arts. Got my yarn. So like this is a label around this particular bundle of yarn. This particular label, notice the little UPC code there. This particular label was done on a computer graphically, but it was done for something that is meant to be mass produced. This label on this water that I'm drinking, this was done, even though somebody did it basically one time in the computer, it was still something that was done that was meant to be mass produced. Book covers, business cards, I don't know, anything that is meant either for mass consumption, mass viewing. A website is the same, even though it's done usually one time on the end of the graphic artist, but still it's meant to go around the web, around the world, and for anybody around the world to be able to access it. So that is a form of graphic arts. Even like something as simple as Nike swoosh, you know, that's a popular one, right? Everybody loved the Nike swoosh, Adidas logo, whatever, anything that is produced that is meant to be consumed by the masses or by a large group of people, and it's just produced over and over again, that is mass production, okay? So Patrick Reason was known to have been one of the first recorded people of African descent over here in the US who had that skill set. And so he's from the 1800s. So he's going to be concerned very often with producing things or producing artwork that is concerned about the topic of the day. And so Henry Bibb is an example here. He's a man kind of similar to Frederick Douglass in the sense that, I don't know if Henry Bibb got into politics like Frederick Douglass did, but Henry Bibb certainly became a businessman. And, but he was someone who was enslaved. Eventually he became free, and he was telling his story in this particular book. Now, Patrick Reason did the artwork for this. And so this was an engraved print, and eventually it went into this particular book that was mass produced so that people could get the word out about what was happening with these people of African descent who were going on to create wonderful, flourishing businesses once they were given their autonomy, or once they took their autonomy, depending on the situation. And so that's what happened with Henry Bibb. And so it was like a form of abolitionist movement in order to put these out, because people, I should clarify, most non-Black people were not interested in seeing the full humanity of people of African descent, because of colonialism and all of the stuff that it did with the minds of those around the planet, okay? And so the poison that came along with that was not seeing any person of African descent as fully human. Now, oh, before I go on to this, let me talk about what an engraved print is. So an engraved print is a sheet of metal. You have a sheet of metal, it's a little bit thicker than, a lot thicker than paper. Think about those notebooks that a lot of times people have, and then they have the papers in between, but on the outer portion is this kind of a lightweight cardboard that encloses or encases the papers in between. The thickness of that cardboard is about somewhere in the neighborhood of the thickness of the metal. So not paper thin, but not extra thick either. And then what would happen is that the engraver comes in with a very sharp tool. And what they have to do when these were printed up, and this is where you know Patrick Reason definitely had a skill set that was amazing. And apparently inside of the book, there were a few illustrations as well that Henry Bibb did, not only the outer, but also I think on the interior of this book. Not sure about that, but I know for sure. Let me just stick with what I know, which is this portrait of Bibb. And so what he would do is he would go to the metal. He, meaning Patrick Reason, would go to the metal, and then he would have the sharp tool. And he would have to, he'd look at Henry Bibb or took a picture of Bibb and knew what he was like, but he had to carve that image in the reverse. So it had to be on the reverse so that when it's inked up, and he had to do highs and lows in certain areas in order to get the lights and the darks, because it's a monotone, meaning there's one tone that's used, one form of black. But based on the highs and lows and how deep he would cut into the metal, you would get saturated blacks or not so saturated blacks, or where certain areas weren't etched out, you know, he would appear lighter or darker. So all of these variations that you're seeing, for instance, in his skin tone, the variations that you're looking at in his hair, the variations even like on the shirt that you're seeing, and wow, look at the hand in the three-dimensional quality that you're seeing in the hand. All of that had to be thought out while Henry Bibb was carving onto this metal in reverse. Okay, so in reverse, because when it's inked up and he sends it through, and it was like a hand crank that he would send it through with the metal sheet, and then paper hitting the metal sheet after it had been inked up. The metal sheet, after the artwork was created, it was inked up, and then the paper would go through on the crank, and it would hit the metal sheet with the ink already on it. And you know, and the artist was basically, their job was to watch. And when it looked like it was getting too faded, they would stop the process of turning the crank, ink up the metal again, and then turn the crank and put out more. Because remember, this is for mass production. This is for this to get into a lot of hands, to get the word out about Henry Bibb, another form of graphic arts. Okay, and then so this was another one that he did. And so again, read up about Reason. He's in your book. Read up about Reason in African-American art. Am I Not a Man and a Brother? And that's what this particular work was called. It was very important what he did, because typically, I'm going to turn to the side. Typically, this is the way that image was looked at. And you know, the person was still in like a pleading position, but they were to the side. You didn't see their face. And so Patrick Reason, again, understanding the importance of confronting people who were challenged with, typically the white population that was challenged with being able to see the full humanity of people of African descent. He wanted to turn that enslaved image toward the viewer so that you were confronted with their humanity. So he turned that face to you. And then that phrase, I don't believe it's something that he coined. I think I saw that on other stuff, but am I not a man and a brother? And just, it was almost like Black Lives Matter. There was something that Rodney King said. I forgot what it was. Can we all just get along? That whatever catchy phrase was at the time. And so this one was one that was a phrase about that. And yeah, so this is what he did. And and it was important for him to deal with for the viewer to deal with the humanity of the message of what he's trying to get across. And this would have been an image that would have been used in abolitionist movements, in abolitionist literature. It could have been at the center and then had text around it. It could have been, I don't know, something that was used in any number of ways, but it was definitely something that was concerned with the abolitionist movement. And I think it's important to find out where Henry Reason ended up locating, where Patrick Reason ended up locating, because that made a difference in terms of the kind of things that he could put out, the environment that he was in. Because had he not been in the right environment, more than likely, his place would have got burnt up, as well as his shop that he was working in. So there were certain regions in the US at certain times that were more, I would say tolerant. Tolerant is a better term because I was gonna say it's more receptive, but I think tolerant is a better term because even though the overwhelming majority of the white population may have let him have his shot, but they didn't necessarily feel like that Patrick Reason or any other person of African descent was equal to them in intelligence, capabilities, blah, 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 because they had bought into the colonial crap that started way back when and divide and conquer stuff. Okay, so that is it. This one would have been done, I believe, also as an engraved print, very similar to this portrait of Bibb. And so again, done in the reverse. And so Am I Not a Man and a Brother, it would have read backwards. And so he had to have all of this stuff kind of laid out so that he knew what he was going to do when he would go in to engrave it. And then it comes out, it's like a mirror. You know, you look in a mirror and you look like you're looking at your right side when you're actually looking at your left side, but in the mirror it looks reversed, same sort of thing, or you have something that's on you and it looks like it's your left, but it's your right. So he had to have that always in mind when he was creating this artwork. Okay, so that is it. Please read up on Patrick Reason. Feel free to text me. You know my number if you have a question. All right, have a beautiful day.